Squale, Iquanacetum Nala, Tenequale. Good evening, welcome. We'll call the meeting to order. It's with great respect and humility that we acknowledge and honor the lands of the Nanaimo people. The Nanaimo people maintain their profound, unique, and spiritual connection to the land through ageless traditions, teachings, stewardship, and expressions of reciprocity. There are no items to transfer to open meeting this evening. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in order? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda. So moved by Tanya and seconded by Leanne. Sorry, I just lost my place in my agenda. Bear with me for a moment, please. There we go. Any discussion? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed to approving the agenda? And just for clarification, we'll be using the chat feature if you want to speak or ask a question or wish to oppose any of the recommendations. Seeing no one in opposition, the motion carries. Moving on to the approval of the minutes, we have one set of minutes of a regular board meeting of June 26th, and it reads that the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting held on June 26, 2024 be adopted. Do we have a mover?
I'll move that.
Moved by Mark. Thank you, Mark. And seconded by Chantel. Any discussion? Seeing any discussion, is there anyone opposed? Seeing no one opposed, the motion carries. Moving on to the Section 72.3 report. That the Section 72.3 report of the closed Board of Education meeting on June 26th, 2024, and the special closed board meeting on August 22nd, 2024 be received. Do we have a mover? Moved by Chantel. Is there a seconder? Anyone like to second the minutes? Moved by Leanne. Any discussion? Okay, no discussion. Is there anybody opposed to the motion? Seeing none, the motion carries. Thank you. So moving on to announcements and reminders, we have the Education Committee meeting on September 4th, 2024, the Business Committee on September 11th, 2024, the Board of Education on September 25th, 2024, and statutory holiday September 2nd and 30th, 2024. And on those days, schools will be closed. We have no presentations this evening, so we'll move on to correspondence under item 11.1. We have correspondence from A. Coutu regarding the summer program complaint. And I see Mark had popped up. Mark, would you like to say anything?
Sure. I just process perhaps some suggestion prior to the motion being moved. Is this there's just some interest in the outcome to the letter? So the district, we don't get into the substance in these matters typically at these meetings, but you know, we've published a concern from the public. Yes, we're confident we've addressed it, but the public wouldn't necessarily see that. So if the board is interested in kind of seeing the outcome in a public fashion, then one option would be to recommend that staff respond to that letter, and then that response becomes public as well, and is published on our website. So just want to throw that out as an alternative option if there's a concern about ensuring that we're publicly aware of an outcome.
Thank you, Mark. So what I'll do for trustees is hopefully reiterate what I think I heard, is that if there's trustee that would like to see a response from staff, then you could read that as the motion rather than the motion as recommended. I have Chantel that's popped up on the screen, and I also have Mark with the question. Go ahead, Chantel.
No, I'm sorry. I don't have the hand up with this meeting, so I wasn't able to put that up there. So go to Mark first, and then I will.
Okay. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Greg. Has this letter been answered already? Has it been responded to?
Mark?
Through your chair. So my understanding is we have not directly responded to the letter in a formal way. We have addressed the issue, but that, of course, is a slightly different action in the circumstance.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. Chantel?
Great. So I'd like to change the motion if and propose a different motion.
Go ahead.
That the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, refer the correspondence from A. Coutu to staff to respond.
Staff for a response.
Staff for a response. Thank you.
Thank you, Chantel. Seconded by Mark. Is everyone clear on how the motion reads? I think, is it okay if I try and paraphrase it, read it back what I think I heard? That the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, refer the correspondence from A. Coutu to staff for a response. Is that what you wanted to say, Chantel?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. So it's been seconded by Mark. Would you like to motivate?
Yes. I just think that when we receive letters like this, it's good for the public to know kind of how, maybe a little bit how we did respond to it. I think it's important for folks to know that we didn't just put it on a shelf here and forget about it. I think it's important for everyone to know kind of some of the things that we did. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to the motion? Not seeing any. I'll call the question then. Is there anybody opposed to the motion? And nobody opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item 11.2, Métis Nation of British Columbia regarding Bill 40, the School Amendment Act, and the new provincial ministerial order on IECs. There is a suggested motion. Would a trustee like to read it or read an alternate motion? Go ahead, Van.
That the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, refer the correspondence from Métis Nation of British Columbia to the board chair for response.
Thank you, Leanne, and that's been seconded by Naomi. Would you like to motivate?
No, I think that's clear, but I do think it's important that we respond to acknowledge the information provided.
Thank you. I agree with you. Any discussion? I'm not seeing any discussion, so I will call the question. Is there anybody opposed to the motion? Oh, my apologies, Laura. Would you like to speak before we vote? No. Okay. I will continue. I think we're playing Teams tag a little bit. That's okay. I will call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Seeing none, the motion carries. Thank you. So we will move on to senior staff reports under item 12.1. The 2023-2024 preliminary year-end accumulated operating surplus. Back over to you, Mark.
Great, thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. And so tonight's report, and I'll just put it in context of where we are at in our kind of yearly process with respect to budget. And so tonight's this is an initial report that reflects our year-end standing as of June 30 of last year. So this isn't related yet, at least, to the 2024-2025 school year. This is talking about the kind of results of where we're at from the end of the 2023-2024 school year. So that's the first thing. Second thing to note, that this is the regular report that we do at this time of year to give us a good sense of where we are, kind of let the board digest, and it's also giving our district, various senior leadership, the opportunity to make some recommendations to the board with respect to expenditures if they are available to us from a surplus perspective, and in this year they in fact will be. And so what you can anticipate is the business committee meeting in about 2 weeks. I believe we publish the agenda Friday after next. Will be a recommended motion with respect to these funds. And so this is just a general overview. The other thing that's going to occur at the business committee meeting is going to be a financial analysis, and the finance team, and Ms. Sutton is here tonight, has done just a stellar job in doing this. One of the leaders in the province, I think, with the way that this work is done. And what that will do is that will not only tell you kind of what I'm going to briefly go through this evening, it's also going to go in depth on how we got here as well. And that's really important because, you know, our end of year results, when we're in a surplus position, we never want to be in a deficit, but we also don't want to be in too much of a surplus position either. And so it just outlines some of the things that we are keeping our eyes on with respect to expenditures and some of the considerations for the board. So now I am unfortunately just working off a single screen this evening, so I'm going to be bringing up the report, and perhaps I could ask you, Chair, just to maybe interrupt me if there's questions, because I'm not going to see that as they pop up. The other thing is Ms. Sutton is here as well, and if she needs to clarify something, I might pause and just see if she'd like to add her perspective. So, sorry, apologies. Finally, what the board's going to be asked to do at the end of this month, so the business committee is going to make some recommendations with respect to the expenditure or not, like where the surplus dollars will flow. And then finally, the board will be looking at our audited financial statements along with this funding as well. So all backwards looking, nothing to do with enrollment today, nothing to do with the 2024-2025 budget, except where we're going to flow funds forward to support various items. So with that in mind, Karen, I'm going to ask at some point, perhaps if you could bring up page 22 of 33 of the agenda. So high level is we are in an excellent financial position from a year-over-year perspective. We have increased our surplus, I will say slightly, because the number is actually much bigger than we'd normally like, but there's a couple of explanations to that we have no control over with respect to why the funds are the way that they are. So when we look at the funds and we have comparators year over year with respect to our total accumulated annual surplus, we're going to go through a few things that the board either just need to bake into our expenditures for the following year, or alternatively, we don't actually have any control over the way that they're expended, but they are considered surplus items. So on page 22, and Karen, if I could get you to bring that up. We have a number of areas of surplus that are driven by our own policies. So we have, you'll see at the top of the first column, the restricted surplus reserve for anticipated unusual expenses. So these are the ideas that we may have one-time expenditures that we would be applying these one-time dollars to. The board can't, this will, of course, will be at the option of the board, but we think that there are things that are pretty fundamental to keep us going and to give some flexibility. And so the board could say no at the end of September to these. These aren't the kind of new items that we would be suggesting to necessarily support the strategic plan. These are kind of risk mitigation items. So the first one is staffing costs, so unanticipated one-time expense. This is an important because we don't know if in the context, if we've applied for a classroom enhancement fund as an example, and we say the kindergarten teacher at school X should be funded by the classroom enhancement fund. And then all of a sudden the ministry says, sorry, you didn't support that well enough because you don't have the evidence, etc. Now we are now on the hook for taking those funds from the operating expense. So we always kept this there in case that we miss our mark on that particular front. Any salary continuance, etc., would result in this as well. Replacement costs, as we noted, and our end of year will show when we do get there in a few weeks, that our replacement costs were extremely high, and so we just don't know if the dynamic continues. Keeping extra funds in that replacement cost fund is something that we think, again, is a prudent mechanism, because we've been able to predict that those expenses have been high. You'll see an EA staffing supplement, and you'll see it goes down from last year to this year. That's actually, we didn't actually build in an EA supplement at this meeting. We built it in at a later meeting. And so here is, we know right now that there's already kids that are coming into the system that need some more supports that will drive some funding. And what we want to do is the district learning services has done a stellar job of making sure that they're front-end loading as much supports as they possibly can within the context of their budget. So this allows us to refill that a little bit, anticipating that there will be more funding that's going to flow from it. And so we would be able to support more EAs as an example, more EA hours as an example. Trustee by-election costs, this is something we're hopeful and optimistic that it won't come in much greater than 100,000, but at the same time, that's a relatively conservative estimate. We, of course, are doing most of this work in-house, which should, again, create savings, but we just can't guarantee that at this time. Finally, the website redesign, very small amount. We just see it as a necessity, and so we don't need a few weeks to think about this. This is something that we've been thinking for a long time, and what we don't want to do is build that money into the operating budget, create a deficit when there's not one needed, when it's a true one-time expense. The next section is talking about financial constraints and targeted funds. And for the most part, these cannot be expended, so the board doesn't have a lot of discretion in expending these. So the district benefit plan, so premium balance. So you'll see that's gone down relatively significantly from year to year. I will note it's gone down almost $3 million in the past 3 or so years because we were holding too high of a balance. That $2 billion amount is prudent and kind of industry standard that we've confirmed with the benefits provider. And so what'll happen is if, as we've seen from year to year, a huge uptake in both expense, and we might not have been funded for all of our benefit usage from collective agreement to collective agreement, but also increased usage. And so that's protecting us in case we've missed in that regard. The ICY team, here is the biggest, we're going to talk to the ministry about this because that $1.1 million is all meant for the current year, but they gave it to us in the previous fiscal year. So it artificially raised our surplus by by over $1 million. And so that you need to take that overall number and contemplate that. Indigenous education program, and you'll see that's gone up a little bit year to year. Money has to be spent. The board will be asking to roll it over, and the team is coming up with a plan to try to make sure that they're doing it, expending all the dollars. Last year was our smallest surplus, I think, in a decade, and so the team's doing a good job, but of course, those are targeted funds, can only be spent on the targeted purpose. Mentorship grant, you'll see that hasn't gone down significantly. Learning services is certainly going to be talking to our partners to how that we can make sure that those funds are going to be expended. And then a few minor items to note that are there. The next one, reserve surplus for multiple years. And so what that is we're not adding to the operating budget, but we know that there's expenditures that will be 1 or 2 or 3 years. So last year the board invested, and I can say the schools greatly appreciated it, kind of $250,000 to replace that equipment in a school that's just wearing down and there's not enough of a budget in the school level, or they have another focus. So they're focused on item X with their staff committees, but they also have basic equipment breakdowns that they can't they have to do one or the other. So what was really great, and kudos to Jackie and Dawn and Tanya for reaching out to the principals and kind of getting a list of everything that was there, and our eyes widened a little bit when we saw how big that list was. And so what we're suggesting is an influx of cash there to really support a bit of a reinvestment directly in our schools and some of those equipment purchases that they can't really afford, or they now have more choice with the remaining dollars. School opening costs, we're opening Rutherford. You'll have a report again, I think, in 2 weeks' time, and so that's there for that. School cash balances, we do allow schools a very minor carry forward of cash, and so consistent year to year, and that's what you're seeing here. Childcare reserve, we are supporting childcare in our system, and that's referencing that right there. So ultimately, oh, sorry, Karen, can you scroll down? I forgot to get you to scroll down. Now, all of these items are absolutely there. One other thing I want to point out is I'm really thankful for the way that we've implemented our third party for our new sites, so our childcare reserve. And so what that is we've realized, and we proposed when we instituted the fees, is that we have these buildings that we've let melt by subsidizing third-party providers for many, many, many years. So we're going about building them ourselves, and they're marvelous units done professionally by our amazing CUPE staff. But in a decade, in 15 years, in 20 years, in 25 years, they're going to need new boilers, new HVAC, new whatever. And so sorry, just one moment. Okay, sorry, some background noise. So what this is this is the base amount of money that we're putting aside to be able to maintain those. So they're self-maintaining facilities, and so that 75,000 is going to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, because the facilities are in great shape. And then in 10 and 15 years, when they start to need that maintenance, we're going to have the money. So a very responsible way forward, and I'm very proud and happy to see that number appear in our financial statements. But again, it appears as a surplus. It will be moved into local capital. So that's really the highlights of where we're at. I will note that on page 6, and Karen, maybe you can close that now and just highlight me again. On page 6 is a local capital schedule, and I'm going just to highlight right now that when we passed the budget back in May or June, we again, for the second year in a row, did not incorporate a local capital transfer to fund technology. And most every district does that, and we didn't, because we anticipated a surplus. And if we had to incorporate a local capital transfer, then what was going to happen was we were going to create a deficit knowing we had a surplus coming up. So we are going to be proposing some fairly significant local capital transfers for technology to finish our Wi-Fi project, and for the board to contemplate with respect to Ladysmith Intermediate for ND contribution, etc. So we want to be very clear that when the board's looking at the kind of unreserved amount, that's what we're contemplating, in addition to a number of items to support the strategic plan and support emergent issues, facing the district. So high level there. Maybe I'll ask Ms. Sutton if she wants to add anything before we open it up to questions, and remembering all of this comes back through our analysis, as well as when the board actually discusses the allocation of the surplus.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh, and through the chair, I would actually like to bring the board's attention back to the restricted surplus reserve for operation spanning multiple school years. The school equipment costs in 22-23, we set aside, as Mr. Walsh indicated, 250,000, and the amount showing this year of 600,000 is to continue with the work that we did. But what I would like just the board to understand is the 250,000 was not the amount that was spent in support of the schools. We actually spent double, if not slightly more than that, which is why we're increasing the amount this year, because the survey that Jackie Poulin and Don Balcom and Kylie and myself, well, they put it out, we went through it and itemized all the pieces, and it was daunting. There was a lot of things out there that are needed in the schools. There's antiquated equipment, there's just a multitude of things, and very good use of one-time money. So we wanted to make sure that we earmarked a reasonable amount this year, which is why the $600,000. So other than that, I don't think I would add anything, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh and Ms. Sutton. Are there any questions, trustees? Not seeing any questions, Mark. I thank you for your report. I suppose we can move on to item 12.2, capital plan bylaw amendment.
Great. And what I would say is perhaps, Chair, I could also suggest that if this is the first time digesting the report for trustees, if they have kind of questions that they anticipate, if they wanted to send them through you for the next meeting so we can kind of prepare and be ready, that would be appreciated. Obviously, we're ready on the spot, but if there's anything that comes up, the best to know in advance so we're ready to answer.
Thank you, Mark.
So our second item here tonight is a pleasant surprise. Well, we were somewhat expecting it, but we are facing some significant enrollment pressures at our secondary schools, as the board is certainly aware. And ND, of course, is at the front of that, or at least was at the front of that. But Wellington has also, in addition to Dover, but Wellington particularly is seeing lots of pressures with respect to enrollment. And in addition, the Ministry of Education and Childcare and the government has focused on trying to do very quick builds. So what they've got is they've given us some districts around the province that have been able to deliver modular kind of pre-made units that are, you know, full classrooms. They're not a portable. What you do is we would lay a slab, like we would do the civil work immediately while all the other stuff is getting built somewhere else, and then it gets delivered, and in a relatively timely fashion, additional, really what we would say is permanent capacity can get added to a school. And so for us, Wellington is the focus, and the ministry has slightly outside of its kind of normal capital approval process, approving a change to add expansion to Wellington Secondary School of 6 classrooms, 150 seats through this particular program. And in order for us to receive the money, and we've already started planning, I will say that, in order for us to receive that money, the board needs to amend its capital bylaw. And that's what's before you this evening. We, again, are in the middle of planning. We will certainly come back to the board when we're closer to what the design looks like, where it might be, etc. The other thing to note is if we are adding space to Wellington, and you will see in 2 weeks' time, we actually intend to take some kids out of Wellington and they end up at Dover because of the Departure Bay with respect to Rutherford opening and the boundaries changing. We may come back to you in the short term as well with some suggestions to alleviate ND when the Wellington expansion is complete. So not a silver bullet to solve all of our capacity issues, but certainly appreciated. The other thing I will say is that this is general instruction space. And so by adding additional general instruction space, we're not necessarily adding to science labs or foods and things like that. And so our team is actively looking at when the units are complete, assuming the board approves, when the units are complete, requesting funds to maybe do a renovation within Wellington itself to add some of that specialty space. So we don't want to just stuff kids in a school because we've got additional classroom space. It needs to be meaningful. There needs to be appropriate learning spaces for those students, and we think Wellington is perfect. Adding another 150 to Dover in a kind of modular way doesn't make sense immediately. Adding it to ND, given the status of that school, doesn't make any sense. So Wellington is kind of in that Goldilocks size, and adding a bit of space is perfect. So it's with a very happy recommendation that the motion is here for the board's consideration. I'm
Thanks,
happy
Mark.
to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark. I guess I'll just like to thank staff for your work on this, and also like to thank the ministry for their support. This is fantastic news for our students, and hopefully it goes a little ways to helping us address some of our space requirements at ND. So put it out there, trustees. Are there any questions or comments? And then when we're ready, there's a suggested motion as well. So I'll start with Chantal.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you to staff for not pushing this through, but like getting us there. This is going to be a good change that's really, really needed in our district with all our growth constraints that are happening. So I really, really appreciate all the hard work staff has been doing and is going to be doing in the future.
Mark, sorry, I was gonna.
Yes, so through you, Chair, and thank you for the indulgence. I thank you so much for the comment. I really do want to highlight the work of Mr. Sabo, the work of Mr. Balcombe, our superintendent. There's lots of discussion, and in fact, I think we're having some influence on how secondary builds are going to be working with this, because you note in the August we were talking about, they're recognizing that elective space is needed, and we're very hopeful that that comes about as well in the next capital plan. And so they've done a really good job, making sure the ministry is apprised of what student needs are, so we can kind of ladder the space and then elective space. And so we're not ending up with, an ND as an example that's got maybe lots of portables, but not enough space for those students.
Exactly. Thank you for looking at it as a holistic way. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Chantal, did you get an opportunity to provide your comment?
Me? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will move to Leanne then, who would like to move the motion.
That the Board of Education approve the amendment to capital bylaw number 2024-2025 CPSD 68-02 to read capital bylaw number 2023-24 CPS SD 68-03, reflecting the Ministry of Education and Child Care's amendment to the annual programs funding agreement.
Thank you, Leanne. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Chantal. Would you like to motivate Leanne?
I think that Mr. Walsh and you and Chantal previously have said a significant amount. I think that while it's not ND, it is going to help us in the long run. And for that, I am grateful that we are able to move this forward and create some space within our secondary schools.
Thanks, Leanne. Any other discussion? Not seeing any discussion, so I suppose I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Not seeing anybody opposed to the motion, so the motion carries. Thank you, Mark and staff who have helped to bring this forward this evening. Okay, so moving on our agenda here, we don't have any unfinished business or new business, and there actually aren't board motions report or trustee committee reports this evening. Do we have any questions, Ms. Matthews? I don't believe we do, but I'll just confirm.
No questions.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, I apologize, Chair. I just realized that the motion will end up reading the years are going to be the same. The years are going to reference 2024-25. Sorry, the 23-24 number in the motion just passed was just an inadvertent inclusion.
Okay, so to be clear, they both should be bylaw number 2024-2025.
That's right.
Not okay. Is everyone okay with that? Any opposed? Thanks for that clarification, Mark. I think that's. Do you want us to reread the motion, or are you okay with making that housekeeping amendment?
I think we're okay.
Okay. Okay, so we have no questions this evening, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Chantel, and do we have a seconder? Seconded by Mark. Any discussion or anyone opposed? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.